Good morning, Rabbi Lord Sachs. Can I say, first of all, what a privilege and honor this is to be able to interview you and to do a live face-to-face interview as opposed to all my previous interviews where I've been looking at a screen. How special this is to be in your garden, to do a socially distanced face-to-face interview. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Well, Rabbi Golker, it's a pleasure to be with you. I congratulate you on all you've done through the social media, through electronic communication until now. It's been really, really good. And welcome to our little Gan Eden HaTachton, our little Golders Green equivalent of the Garden of Eden.
Well, it's very special. And I know as we approach Rosh Hashanah, everyone's minds are now thinking about the High Holy Days, which are certainly going to be very different this year. I know the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says, Tichle Shana v'Killo Seha, the year and its curses should come to an end. 2020 has been a very unusual one. If you could tell me, how have you been doing? How has lockdown treated you? And what have you learnt over these past months?
Well, fairly early on during lockdown, my rather mischievous brother in Jerusalem said to me, Jonathan, you've been socially isolating all your life. So because we're quite quiet people, Elaine and I probably didn't feel it as badly as some did, but it was certainly very challenging. We will take with us two indelible memories. Number one, the bar mitzvah of our grandson, which took place here in this garden through Zoom, and it worked very well actually. And it was just somehow young Elisha rose to the challenge, and it just worked. And the second one was Elaine and I celebrating our golden wedding a few weeks later, and that felt really quite special. I mean, we got married quite young, and just to think that 50 years later we'll still be very much in love and very much celebrating life. That was meaningful for us.
How special. Please God, you should have a wonderful year ahead. And as we turn towards Rosh Hashanah, one of the things we've been doing in St. John's Wood is we have had a competition for our children to create a Rosh Hashanah greeting card for the senior members of our community. Rosh Hashanah, of course, is a time we think of apple and honey cake, we celebrate with family and friends, but I guess really the focal point is tefillah, is prayer. So I'd like to use this time together to have a little bit of a discussion about prayer. Before we begin, perhaps you could share with us some of your great memories of Rosh Hashanah as a child, perhaps Rosh Hashanah as Chief Rabbi. It would be great for us to learn more.
The Rosh Hashanah I will never forget, because it changed my life completely, was in 1968. I had just finished my second year at university. I was in search of spiritual inspiration. I had a feeling that I would find it in the United States, where I knew there were great rabbis. And indeed, I met many, if not most, of the great rabbis in America that summer. I spent almost 3 months in America, traveling right round and up to Canada, and meeting all the rabbis I could, including, let's say, the man who just passed away a few weeks ago, the late Rabbi Norman Lamb of blessed memory, including Rabbi Soloveitchik, Zatzal, but most importantly, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. Now that yechidut, that encounter, I've told the story of, you can find it on YouTube. I'm not going to retell that story. But one thing did happen, every Shabbat or two, the Rebbe would verbring. He would give a talk, and there would be, especially running up in Elul to Rosh Hashanah, 5,000-10,000 Hasidim there, sitting on tables, on benches, on tables, the whole of the bleachers, the whole thing held together by faith. It was unbelievable that nobody fell down or got injured because there were so many people. And the Rebbe would talk for 5 or 6 hours, but in 20-minute sections, and between each section, all the Hasidim would sing a song, and the Rebbe would sing with them. And I was due to fly back to London the next day on a Sunday. And the Hasidim tell me that if you're going back, if you're leaving, you take a bottle of vodka, and while everyone's singing, you go up to the Rebbe, and you pour him a little glass, and he says a l'chaim, and the rest of the bottle is the Rebbe's vodka, and you take it with you and you give it to people. So that's what happened about 2 hours or 3 hours into this Verbrang. When you say, go, go, you know. So I go, I make my way to the Rebbe, and I give him a little glass of vodka from the bottle. And don't forget, there are 5,000 to 10,000 people watching this. And the Rebbe stops singing. He says, "What's this? You're leaving?" I said, "Yes, I'm leaving. Tomorrow." He said, "Why?" I said, "I had to get back to Cambridge, to the university." He said to me, "But the Cambridge term does not begin until the second week of October. I think you should stay." Well, everyone could see this exchange. And the Rebbe never did this. He just said a l'chaim, and that's it. And they could see him having this conversation with me. So when I got back, they wanted to know, what did he say? What did he say? And I'm afraid, inexperienced as I was, I told them, which was probably a big mistake. Because as far as the Hasidim were concerned, if the Rebbe says he'd better stay, then he'd better stay. So, and I won't go into the details, somehow the next day they prevented me from catching my plane. I said, "How am I going to get back? This was a charter flight, there's no way I can get back." I said, "Don't worry. We've told the airline, we've told the airport you're ill." And I said, "But I'm not." And they said, "Tomorrow we're going to take you to the Rebbe's doctor and we'll find out what's wrong with you." It's a long story. I will cut to the chase. The end result was I spent Rosh Hashanah with the Rebbe. I davened slichos with the Rebbe. And let me tell you what davening slichos with the Rebbe is like. When you get to the end of slichos, Rachmana Deone, we danced on that one line for an hour and a half. The next time I passed the Rebbe, he stopped and said, "I hear you were up late last night." So I got to hear the Rebbe blow shofar. It was like no shofar blowing I had ever heard before. It was so clear, so pristine. It was unearthly. And that was an incredibly, incredibly moving experience for me. I also told the other end of that experience when we had Chazan Shulem Lemmer with us in St. John's Wood. I don't know if you remember.
Sure.
That lunch on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, I was a guest together with a composer of big hit pop songs who'd given up Judaism for years and years and years and years. And he was traveling in the middle of the Midwest, in the middle of nowhere, when suddenly a tune from Cheder comes into his head. And he says, "Hang on, it must be coming up to Rosh Hashanah." He stopped his car, turned it around and drove straight to Brooklyn. From which I understood one of the Rebbe's things. The Rebbe was into music, into singing. The Rebbe's composed songs. And I saw that this man had one song in his mind, only one. That's all that was left of his Judaism from when he was 5 years old. And that's one song was enough to bring him back.
Absolutely.
So that is a Rosh Hashanah I will never forget.
I want to know if you still have the bottle of vodka. Perhaps we could have a l'chaim for Shabbat.
I decided that the bottle of vodka should be shared as widely and quickly as possible because it proved to be very dangerous indeed.
You know, for me, looking back at my most special Rosh Hashanah memory and Yom Kippur memory, one of them clearly is in St. John's Wood Synagogue, that moment on Kol Nidre, when the entire synagogue is full and everyone is dressed in white, all the men are wearing their talesim and kittles, and it's a packed sanctuary. And I'm standing on the bimah with Dayan Binstock and the Chazan, holding the Torah, and it's an incredible, emotional moment. This year is going to be very different. There's going to be a lot less people in shul for those people who are shielding. There are going to be people wearing face masks, socially distanced, a lot less singing. And really, my question for you, Rabbi Lord Sachs, is how do we make sure that Rosh Hashanah is still meaningful, despite the unusual circumstances we find ourselves in?
I think there are three things you can do here. Number one, I felt that there were a lot of people in this situation on ordinary years, you know, where we were sitting in shul by all means, but not really connecting with the prayers. And that's why I spent 5 years of my life doing my machzorim. I think my Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur machzorim are possibly the greatest achievement I ever made. And people do tell me that they've changed their Yom Tov for them, because they allow you, it's part explanatory, what are we doing, and it's part inspirational, what am I doing? And so I think number one, if you're able to get hold of those machzorim, they're written for a different constituency than any other machzor. When I was the rabbi for the first time in the United Synagogue in Golders Green, I just sensed that many people who didn't know. And that's when the idea was born, although it took me 30 years or so to get round to it. But in the end, I did get round to it, and I think they work. The second thing is something I do every year, and I really recommend people do this year, which is choose the electronic media. Personally, I use YouTube. And listen to some inspirational music. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about Shulem Lemmer's Avinu Malkeinu. Yes. I was blown away when I heard that for the first time. As soon as I heard it, I said to Rabbi Rosenfeld, Lionel, we've got to do this. And so we do it ever since Lionel and I sing it together.
I can ask our viewers, we're going to interject and allow you to watch this right now, and then perhaps you can tell us your reflections on the Avinu Malkeinu.
Yeah.
Avinu Malkeinu Shema Koleinu Shema Koleinu Shema Koleinu Shema
Rabbi Lord Sachs, you'll remember that very special Shabbat we had with Shulem Lemmer last
Sure.
November in St. John's Wood, so it's wonderful to be able to include him in this conversation.
Shulem is a brilliant young musician. And of course what he's doing in this song, the Gemara tells us, is something we learn from Rabbi Akiva, who came late to Judaism. But as a result had a very, very sort of almost childlike approach to Judaism and saw things that many people had forgotten. And people were davening 24 brachot, on and on and on for a Tanit Tzibur, a communal fast, for the rain to fall. And Rabbi Akiva just, davened 2 lines. Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha, Avinu Malkeinu, Slachem Uchal Lechateinu, whatever it was he said, just 2 lines. And it's actually in those 2 words that the heart of Jewish prayer is to be found. You are our King, but you're also our Father. A king can judge us, sentence us, punish us. But a father loves us, and that love overcomes so much else. And that's what Rabbi Akiva understood, and you can kind of hear this in Shulem's singing. It's a beautiful piece of music, sung by an extraordinary Chazan.
We're also blessed in St. John's Wood with the incredible Avreimi Kirshenbaum and more recently Chazan Tzvi Weiss. And the next piece comes from the Avodah on Yom Kippur, which is a very strange time on Yom Kippur afternoon where many people are already thinking about what they're going to break their fast on, and they're miles away from focusing on talking about temple times and the service. But of course it's a beautiful piece that really is special to listen to. Perhaps you could give us some meaning and insight how to tap into the Avodah on Yom Kippur.
Oh
perhaps you could give us some meaning and insight how to tap into the avoda on Yom Kippur.
Yeah, it's very simple. You have to think what politics has been like for the last few months and the last few years. And whichever side of the political divide you sit, you have probably not heard too many prime ministers or presidents saying, "Forgive me, I got it wrong. Forgive me, I ignored your pain. Forgive me, I have not addressed your group's needs." And I want us together as a nation to kneel down in front of the Almighty and say, "Almighty, we come together as a nation. And we bow down in humility. We bow down in a sense of inadequacy. And we ask you, Almighty, to forgive us, not as individuals, but collectively as a nation." Now think what that might give to the nations today, in which politics has become a sort of battle of alpha males and competitive egos, in which no politician is ever allowed to say, "I got it wrong." What makes temple times different from now is that in those days, Jews were a sufficiently united people to have one man apologize for all of us. First he had to apologize for himself, then for his household, then for all of the people. Now you have to visualize that. You have to visualize the hundreds and thousands and millions who came to Jerusalem just to see this, because there was never a moment of solemnity like it. Every serious human being, from kings to prime ministers to everyone, was there. But it was the Kohen Gadol who abased himself before God and did so in a way that communicated extreme emotion to the whole people. And that's what this is all about.
Tefillah, prayer, is all about building a relationship with God. In today's world, it's a challenge because some people find prayer quite static. We very much do it by rote, Shachrit Mincha Maariv, Shachrit Mincha Maariv. It's very much structured in a way that doesn't allow sometimes people to have flexibility within their prayers. You have your different nusachim and your different ways and your different tunes, but generally it's very much the same each and every day, each and every Shabbat, each and every festival. How can we ensure that prayer doesn't become something we just do by rote and it stays inspirational? And also, especially for people who are praying and they don't understand what they're saying. It's not in their mother tongue, they don't understand the language. How can we make sure they feel connected to prayer?
My physiotherapist has given me a set of exercises because I have a bad knee. I have to do them 3 times a day. 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock. They're always the same. Do I feel inspired personally after every exercise? No. Do they achieve a miraculous cure? No. Do they make my knee immune to further damage? Not even that, because I can still go for a walk and find my knee hurting. But this I know, that if I keep doing those exercises, my knee will get better over time. My whole life will be improved because I can move so much more easily. Truth is, everything about me will be a little bit better. That's what prayer is. What exercise is to the body, prayer is to the soul, and it's that simple. Do not expect to be inspired every time. For inspiration, God gave us Shabbos and Yom Tov. And it's beautiful and they're inspiring. But I have to tell you, if you were totally and absolutely inspired every single day, 3 times a day, you would be bored faster than you can imagine.
We all know the week before Rosh Hashanah we begin Slichot. I'd like to share with you a short clip from highlights of Slichot at St. John's Wood. Now every year this is really a highlight in the calendar. We have an amazingly full shul, not only of local members from St. John's Wood, but people from Golders Green and Stamford Hill, and they come along to hear the Neimah singers and to hear the Chazanim, Chazan Kirshenbaum, and it's really a special occasion. How do we try and replicate that this year specifically? And also, it seems a little bit strange. The word slichot is, of course, forgiveness, asking Hashem to accept our apology, but yeah, it's a choral concert. How do you resolve that conflict?
First of all, let me explain what slichot are. We have in the Torah 2 different narratives about Yom Kippur. Narrative 1 is Moshe Rabbeinu praying for forgiveness for the Jewish people after the sin of the golden calf. He prays for 40 days, 40 nights, the beginning on Rosh Chodesh Elul and coming down from the mountain with new tablets of stone on the 10th of Tishri, the first Yom Kippur. And that is Moshe Rabbeinu's Yom Kippur. I call it the prophetic Yom Kippur. But thereafter there is an obvious problem, because that generation had a Moshe Rabbeinu. Not every generation has a Moshe Rabbeinu. Not everyone is able to ascend the mountain and achieve forgiveness directly and personally from God. And therefore, since human sin is a permanent feature of our condition, the Torah had to give us a permanent form of forgiveness. And therefore the second Yom Kippur was established. It's in Parshat Acharei, in which the high priest atones for all Israel by a sacrificial service, essentially. And that is the priestly Yom Kippur. And they use different kind of language. And slicha, used in the kol, is a prophetic word. The Kohanim don't use that word. They use it in the nifal, the nislach, but not in the kol. And what the Kohen did, what the high priest did, was chotasi ovisi poshati, vidui, confession. So we have these two models. Slichot is the prophetic model, and vidui, which we do very much on Yom Kippur, Hashamnu Begadnu and Al Chet Shechatanu, that's the priestly one. Priestly things always have a fixed time. Prophetic ones don't, so that is a different thing. So that is essentially telling us what it is to do slichot. It's a very personal, please Hashem forgive me, or please Hashem forgive us. And oddly enough, this extract you have chosen shows a really, really unusual Jewish attribute. It's an Aramaic word, although most people think it's a Yiddish word, namely chutzpah. So the Chazan is saying, Haneshama lach, v'aguf polach, chusana al amalach, ribbonu shel olam. You made us. You know, the soul is yours, the body is your work. Have rachmanos on us because we're yours. So, you know, don't blame us if we sin occasionally, because you made us with the capacity to sin occasionally. So that is why we can, as it were, say slichot in a voice of somewhat self-confidence. Very hard to say vidui in a voice of self-confidence. It's true that we do sometimes throw in self-confidence where it's least expected. So I don't know whether everyone davens this way. Certainly they do in the United Synagogue, in one of the most self-abasing lines of prayer. Avinu Malkeinu Chanenu V'anenu Ki Ein Banu Ma'asim. I said, you know, and everyone's singing Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. We have nothing good about us, nothing. We're total garnished, mid-garnished, you know. So somehow or other we manage, even when very, very penitential, to summon our human dignity and come before God in a sense of being a member of the royal family, because Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, is our King. That makes every one of us a member of the royal family.
The next clip that I want to share with you is from our wonderful Rabbi Yossi Binstock, who brings the community to life with his spirit and his tunes. And this clip is Mochel Avanot.
Moichel avoynois amoy, ma'avir rishoin, marpe machiala, lachatoim, Saliacha lafoyshim, oy say tzedakos, oy say tzedakos, im kol basar baruch. La
Mochel Avonot Amo is a particularly beautiful tune. And I'm going to miss this year the atmosphere that we have at Neimah, where everyone really, really, really joins in. And we sing that several times. I mean, it occurs up to 7 times, depending on which nusach you're following. And, sometimes I get a little upset by Jewish intellectuals. I never knew, she lived way before my time, a lady called Hannah Arendt, who was a very, very brilliant philosopher. But somebody for whom many, many aspects of her life and her writing I actually found unforgivable. And this was one. If you read her book, The Human Condition, you will see that she writes that forgiveness is a Christian invention. I think to myself, Hannah, you're Jewish. Did you never go to shul on Yom Kippur? The supreme day of the Jewish year is the day of forgiveness. That's what God does. He's mochel avonot amo. Now the idea of forgiveness is really unusual. And it really is something Judaism brought into the world. And indeed Christianity then adopted it. The idea that God is not an impersonal force, like the sun or the wind or the rain. God is Hashem. He's someone whom we can say Baruch Atah, we can say you. And we have a personal relationship with Hashem. And it's a very close and intimate one. And it is only out of a close personal relationship that the concept of forgiveness is born, because technically, from an objective point of view, what you've done is a sin, an offense, it's a crime, whatever it is, it deserves punishment. But somehow, the judge, not just being a judge, but also our Father, cannot condemn his children. Which is, what Ezekiel keeps saying, God doesn't want the death of the wicked, but his return and his forgiveness. So all the prophets spoke about forgiveness, and particularly Ezekiel. The reason Ezekiel spoke about forgiveness is because he was the prophet who went into exile to Babylon. He was one of the very few prophets who prophesied outside of Israel. And he saw this people who were totally broken-hearted, Al Narod Bavel, by the waters of Babylon we sat and wept as we remember Zion, how will we sing the Lord's song in a strange land. We're cut off physically, we're cut off spiritually. And Ezekiel had to tell them, you are not going to be punished for the sins of your parents. Just cheer up. Just go to God, pray for forgiveness, and he is going to forgive you. And that was a historical development of the most fundamental order. And the one thing Hannah Arendt said that I think is true is that forgiveness means that we are not held captive by the past. If there were no such thing as forgiveness, every wrong we ever did would be there forever. In fact, the Rambam says the same thing in the Morah HaNevuchim. So that is what makes it, this very gentle tune actually marks a major, major development in the history of the human imagination.
And there are so many people who will be watching this who I'm sure in their own personal lives have disagreements, have arguments, have had falling outs within families and within social situations. And I hope, please God, by watching this and hearing the beautiful tunes, they can be inspired to try and make amends.
Can I tell you something? I used to be quite poor when I was a student. And the station from Cambridge is quite a long way from the colleges. And I had to come up every term with 2 immensely heavy suitcases. And I am not a weightlifter. And I just was too stingy to afford a taxi. So I would walk the whole way. You know, and I can still in my mind feel those strained muscles. They were among the most painful things I knew. And forgiving is like letting go of those 2 suitcases. You know? Just don't carry that emotional baggage with you. You are tiring yourself out, not just other people.
The final clip I want to speak to you about is perhaps the conundrum, the most dramatic moment of Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, when we say Unasana Tokef, and at the very end of that prayer there's this beautiful, beautiful bit, Emes, which we're going to see contrasts the fragility of man with the eternity of God. Please watch this.
כי אם בשובוי מדרכוי וחובוי ועד יום מויסוי תחכה לו אם ישוב מיד תקבלו ay 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 emes ki ato yoitzrom ay 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 ve'ato yoide yoitzrom ki
This is one of the most actually hauntingly beautiful of Jewish prayers. It's sort of the 4th movement of this masterpiece called Unatana Tokef. And it's about the fleetingness of life. Life is like a broken shard, like a passing shadow, like a wind-blown cloud, like a dust that's blown, like a fleeting dream. Now, what of course the prayer is telling us is, for heaven's sake, cherish it. That is what Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are all about. Zachrenu l'chaim, melech hafetz b'chaim, v'chosvenu b'sefer chaim, l'mancha elokim chaim. Life, life, life. Remember us for life, King who delights in life, and write us in the book of life. The one thing we really, really must take from this coronavirus pandemic is that we have been conscious, even though we can't see it anywhere, of the tremendous risk of death that is surrounding us and surrounding the world. And just to protect ourselves against it, we have to suddenly halt almost all our activities, wear masks, goodness knows what, And suddenly we've been brought face to face with the fragility of life. Exactly as this passage from Anatana Tokev talks about it. And basically Hashem is saying to us this: Kinderlich, I've given you only one thing. It's called life. It's the only thing I can give you. All the rest, you're going to have to work for yourself. I've given you wonderful resources, an entire universe of blessings. But the rest you're going to have to work for. This one is my gift to you. Don't take that gift for granted. And from time to time, if you take it for granted because you think, Ani amarti b'shalvi bal amut le'olam, I said in my peace of mind that I can never be moved, I'm invulnerable. I'm going to remind you that you are actually vulnerable. And therefore I want you to cry out to me from the depths of your soul. Ribono Shel Olam, write us in the book of life. I want to hear from you that you know that this is my gift to you. And then I will write you in the book of life.
To conclude, I want to, first of all, wish you a Shana Tova Matuka, a Shana Tova Tikatev, V'Techasev, Al Techaim Tov Shalom. You should be inscribed in the book of life and good health and continue with the incredible impact you make. And if I may, as one final question, or perhaps request, what advice would you give a young aspiring rabbi? I look up to you as someone who's such a role model, has made such an impact on the Jewish world. What advice and blessing can you offer me?
Number one, you've already followed. Marry the right woman. Number two, aseh lecha rav. Find the role models. I've always kind of done that. I told you the story about being with the Rabbi at the age of 20. I just felt, let's go and find these people. We've just lost three of the people that meant a great deal to me and who inspired me, the late of Nochem Rabinovich Zatzal, my own teacher, the late Rabbi Lam Zatzal, the head of Yeshiva University, whom I met on that trip already and got to know quite well throughout his life, and the late Rav Adin Steinsaltz Zatzal, whom I knew very well indeed. You know these people that kind of lift your sights. And then finally, just go the tiniest bit out of your comfort zone. Do something you never did before. Now, I don't think you ever produced programs like this before, did you? So you've challenged yourself. And I would really do that once a year. Set yourself a challenge. Don't think you're going to get all of them, Some of them you'll try and it just won't work. It doesn't matter. The blessing is in the trying.
Rabbi Lil Sachs, thank you so much.
Shana Tova to everyone watching this video. Shana Tova to you, Rabbi Golker, and your wife and your lovely children, and all the St. John's Wood community, and may Hashem hear and answer all our prayers.
Amen.